All right, OLR exclusive fans, we are on with Jay Semko of the Canadian rock band Northern Pikes. How are you today, Jay?
Good, Victoria. How are you doing?
Very good, very good. I'm excited about this interview, so.
Good, cool. Well,
Um,
I'm excited to talk to you. It's a wintry afternoon. I'm here in Saskatoon, and it's sort of a little bit semi-winter stormish, So it's a nice day to be sitting and chatting with you on the phone. That's for sure.
have a nice cup of coffee and be
You
nice and
bet.
warm.
I've got a fresh cup.
Nice.
So that's good.
All right, so my first question is what made you decide to get into the music industry?
Oh boy, that's a pretty good question. I never really thought. I never had a goal to like music industry per se, or to get into music necessarily as a career. I guess from a kid, I always loved music. I loved listening to pop radio when I was a little kid. I lived on a farm outside of Saskatoon, and I would listen to the radio, and I got to know all the songs. I would know even what all the chart numbers were and all the songs and that kind of thing. And had a little transistor radio. This is back in the '60s, so well, a number of years ago. And then from there, I guess I took piano lessons at the school that I went to. They offered piano lessons for kids if they wanted them, and so I did take piano for I guess a couple of years. But that was when I was, I guess, like in grade 1 and 2. But I really didn't have a real knack for piano. I could pick out songs very easily in terms of finding little melodies on the keyboard and that kind of thing. But I really wasn't, I really couldn't read notes all that well. I found it very difficult to connect the notation to what my hands and my ears were trying to do. So I found that a little bit frustrating. So I kind of bailed out on that, I guess, after a couple of years. Although I did learn some things that were important that I didn't realize how important they were until I did a little bit of music. And so I guess, like I say, I was a fan of music. And then I started taking music lessons in Saskatoon, which was, we would go into the city of Saskatoon. The farm we lived on was outside of the city. And on Saturdays, I would go in and take like swimming lessons at the YMCA. And they also had a thing up on the wall one day that I saw, and they were offering guitar lessons. So I took guitar lessons from a guitar teacher there, and he was really cool because he taught me chords. He wasn't trying to turn his students into classical musicians or anything. His whole goal was to, so you could strum and play songs. And at the same time, my dad had an acoustic guitar, and he would kind of noodle around on it. And he had a little book where he had kind of folk songs, and we played like Red River Valley and that kind of thing. And so between those things, I started picking up the guitar, and I had a good knack for it. And it was really fun to actually play the chords and imagine the melodies in my head. And I think the one that I was really proud of, one of the first ones that I really learned was Four Strong Winds. And I ended up, the Ian Tyson classic Canadiana. And then I guess what happened through a series of events, we ended up moving into the city, and I guess I was in grade 7. And then at that point, I took further guitar lessons. I started going downtown to Gordy Brandt's Music and was taking guitar lessons, and also started taking bass lessons because I wanted to be in a rock band really bad. And when I moved into the city, there were lots of really good guitar players around, but nobody played the bass. And back then, in the early '70s, every band had a bass player. I know since then there have been bands like the Black Keys and White Stripes, etc., that have been bassless without a bassist. And but at that time, bass was important. And I remember going to a dance, I think when I was in grade 7. Moved into the city halfway through grade 7 and saw a rock band playing at a dance at the school I went to, Greystone Heights, and I was fascinated with the bass and that low thump thing that happened is a very primeval thing. And yeah, so I just kind of I started taking lessons. I was very lucky. The street that I lived on had two other kids that were there were other musicians. There was a guitar player and a drummer, and both of them were really good. There was Mark Wolf and Jimmy Walker, and so between jamming with the guys, taking lessons, and then practicing a lot on my own in terms of trying to play along with records, and I'm talking like vinyl records, and lifting up the needle and finding the same spot over and over again so you could see how certain things went in certain songs, and I would play along with my favorite music, and that was kind of rock music of the day, and that would have been bands like Creedence Clearwater Revival and the Rolling Stones and David Bowie and the Guess Who and various artists like that I was a fan of, and started learning these songs. And then I guess really from there, I developed a level of proficiency in my mid-teens after kind of locking myself away in my bedroom for a couple of years and practicing like crazy, and started playing with rock bands, and developed a reputation as a pretty good bass player. So I started getting hired on to play with various groups as a kind of a hired gun bass player, and I really didn't make much money at it. It was fairly minimal, especially when you traveled out of town. And back then you would go to play at dances in small towns, and sometimes high school dances and public school dances within the city. And, all those things just added up to experience and learning how to become better at what I did. And then I guess when I was, in 18, I started a band called the Idols, which were kind of this was 1978, 1979, and we ended up becoming billed as Saskatchewan's first new wave band. And the music that we were playing a lot of cover songs by people like Elvis Costello and Squeeze and The Police and Joe Jackson and people like that. And we were quite different for the time. I mean, we all cut our hair short, and we leaped around, and we were, we liked, this was the first wave of new wave music, the first wave of kind of punk rock music, and we were out playing. We played a lot of cover songs, and at that time I started trying to write songs, because it was really a do-it-yourself mentality going on with the whole new wave punk rock thing, and I was quite fascinated by it. I was lucky enough to have some music friends that played instruments, and we had this band called the Idols, and it went through a number of evolutions, I guess, over the course of a few years. We ended up recording a single, 45, and we put it out. It got played on the local radio station and that kind of thing, and just the fact of getting the experience together. Now, I guess during that time, I worked at various jobs. I went to the University of Saskatchewan for a year and a half in arts and science. I was never a great student, and I ended up bailing out on that, I guess, in my second year, and continued to play music, and ended up being in a number of groups, I guess, beyond the Idols. But the good thing is about having started doing this at a young age, I guess in my mid-teens, is I developed a lot of experience and a lot of skill, and even though you can develop a level of proficiency as a musician, there's a lot more to it when you're out there playing live and learning how to play in front of people and all these other skills when you travel. Just driving to get to a place and getting there and learning about gear and learning about songs, and the nice thing is when you learn by playing cover versions of other people's songs, you do learn by osmosis what is a good arrangement of a song, and what works when you play it in front of an audience, and all this wide kind of skill set that you just you naturally learn the more you do it through experience. And so I went through a few other groups, I guess, beyond the Idols. There was a band called 17 Envelope, and a band called the Maximums, and other ones that I can't think of right now. And in one of those bands, the Maximums, was a guy named Brian Potvin, and he and I ended up kind of sort of we were saying the word bail, but we just kind of abandoned music after a while in frustration. We had tried to get a few things going, and then I hadn't seen him really for probably almost a year. And then I ran into him at university, and we were both, I guess, doing this because we were trying to do something that was beyond, I guess, some of the fairly mundane jobs, at least we considered them mundane at that time, that we were doing. So he was in university and so was I, and we said, oh, let's go for a drink. So we went down to Louis' pub, and we sat there basically for a number of hours and started talking about all the errors we had made in previous bands that we'd been in, and what would we do different, and how would we be a better band. And by the end of that all, we decided that we were going to create a new band. And we promptly both quit university and got a hold of some of our other music friends that we knew we were interested in having in a band with us, and started rehearsing and created this band called the Northern Pikes. And we rehearsed hard, actually, for a couple of months. Talked to our agent, the man who became our agent for at least the first part of our career in the Northern Pikes, Robert Hodgins. And I can remember saying to Robert, can you just book us anywhere and everywhere? We just want to play. We want to make money, or at least a little bit of money, because what we want to do is we want to record our own music. And Saskatoon, you got to understand, was a very isolated place back then. And even Saskatchewan, there weren't a lot of groups that were really attaining any, level of notoriety other than, I can say some obvious things here, like Joni Mitchell, who became one of the best singer-songwriters, basically, of all time. But she was originally from Saskatoon, but, really right after high school she left. And, there was a band that had achieved some pretty good success called Streetheart. They were the first band that I ever actually saw in a bar. I snuck into a bar when I was 15, and they were a band on the rise. And it was really exciting to see this band that was kind of, really cool things were happening for them, and they had signed a record deal, and that was really what you needed to do to develop any level of notoriety back in those days. So our goal in the days of the Northern Pikes, in the early days, was to make enough money to finance independent recordings. So we did that. We went out on the road for about 6 months, and we played, like you'd play back then. There was a circuit, and you would play 1 week at a time in nightclubs. And most cities and towns had at least one. And I can remember playing for a week in places like Weyburn and Swift Current and Yorkton and Regina and Prince Albert and Lloydminster and North Battleford and Drumheller. The list kind of goes on. And one of those places was Banff, Alberta, which was a very popular tourist spot. And that was one of the funnest places. And there you'd get booked for 2 weeks. And the thing that did was it really allowed the Northern Pikes to develop our sound and to get good at what we were doing as a group. And the nice thing is, by the time the Northern Pikes came along, even though we were all in our early 20s, the members of the group, we were all very proficient at playing live and proficient at our instruments, even though you never stop learning, you never stop developing. But because of the work that we were doing and the playing steadily, doing a week at a time in clubs, we got pretty good. We developed a good reputation as a live group, and we would sneak our own music in, even though in those days you were playing cover songs, the top 40 songs and popular songs of the day. We ended up getting enough money together to do our first recording, and we had a good friend by the name of Mitch Barnett, who was a recording engineer at a recording studio just outside of Saskatoon called Studio West. And they would do kind of deals for young bands for demo recordings and things. And Mitch, being a good buddy, he was obviously very anxious to have us come in, and he knew that we were a pretty good band. And so he would kind of sneak us in sometimes in the middle of the night or get us really good rates on recording. And that started to develop our recording skills, because that's a whole other thing that you kind of need to learn to become good and proficient in a recording studio. And so, long story short, we did an independent album in 1984, released in 1984, just called The Northern Pikes. It had 6 songs on it. They were original songs, and they were all written by myself. I kind of had become the primary songwriter in the band. Now that did change over the course of time, and Merle Brick and Brian Potvin and Don Schmidt, everybody ended up becoming a songwriter, and good songwriters eventually too. And anyway, we did this EP. We put it out, and yeah, we sent it all over Canada and all over the United States to all the college radio stations and some commercial stations that we thought might play our music. It was challenging to find the list of these stations back then. I remember for the U.S., I had to wrote a letter to the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. to get a list of all the college stations in the USA. So we found this kind of list of these things. We part of our budget in our recording thing was packaging these things up and sending them out. And the nice thing that Robert Hodgins did at that time, he said, well, I think what you guys should do is include a little card, a self-addressed kind of card that is like a comment card and lets you know whether they're playing you or not. Because this would be 1984, and this is before, pre-internet and that whole thing. And so we sent it out and really didn't hear too much back. We kept playing, but what happened sort of, I guess, in late 1984 is we started realizing that we really wanted to be an original group, and we wanted to play mainly our own music. And so we started incorporating more of that into our club shows for a week at a time, and a lot of the club owners didn't really like that. They wanted us to play the hits of the day, etc. So our club touring and our club circuit kind of started to dwindle. So we kind of all went back to trying to work part-time jobs and stuff back in Saskatoon, and the band essentially kind of semi-broke up. But what ended up happening was we started receiving feedback from these stations in Canada and the US, and they loved the record. They loved the EP, the first Northern Pikes EP. And so we started getting chart numbers, and in fact, we ended up charting at like number one at many, many college and indie radio stations throughout Canada and the USA. And it sort of renewed our interest in continuing the band. So we ended up setting up another set of recording sessions, by that time we weren't playing as a full-time group, so we were working part-time and playing as often as we could, but we ended up getting loans at the bank. I remember getting a loan for like $2,500 at the bank, and and I was able to do it because I'd had a car loan before, so I was able to actually to get this loan. We recorded our second album, which we entitled "Seen in North America," and at that time, really, by then it was really just three of us. That was Merle Brick and Brian Plotman and myself, just the three of us, with kind of other musicians, a bit of a revolving door of other musicians that we would bring in to play drums and sometimes to play other guitar, but really for the most part it was the three of us. And the biggest thing was finding a drummer. And Don Schmidt, we had played with Donnie in the Idols, and he had filled in with the Northern Pikes in a few situations, but he had a good job, and he had a young family at that time, and he wasn't really willing to try and do this as a full-time thing. But during the course of in mid-1985, we attracted the interest of some people in Toronto, and one of them was Fraser Hill, who was a record producer, and he and Rick Hutt were a production team, and he really loved the band. He heard our recordings and really kind of fell in love with our music. And at the same time, really, I guess there was another guy named Ed Smeal who worked at a booking agency called The Agency at that time in Toronto. And between the two of them, they started communicating with us and with Robert Hodgins, who was our agent at the time, and started communicating, I guess, with me and the other guys in the band. And Fraser flew out to Saskatoon and spent some time in the summer of '85 working with us, because his goal was to produce records with the Northern Pikes. And we ended up practicing in my parents' garage. We were rehearsing there for a number of days, and we learned a lot working with Fraser. He tightened us up, and he was kind of like a coach that really was able to bring our writing and our performing and just our recording skills and arranging skills up to a higher level. And he and Rick ended up producing 3 of our albums, I guess, once we ended up signing a record deal, which did happen. So a lot of stuff started to kind of happen quickly, I guess, in late 1985. We did our first trip out to Toronto. We made a really big splash out there, and all the record labels in Canada and some in the United States became very interested in the band, and we started touring right across the country, and we're playing our own music, and we were getting some commercial airplay through our indie records, as well as on college and indie radio. And I guess it just sort of snowballed from there. We ended up, Doug Chappelle was the president of Virgin Records, and he actually flew out to Saskatoon to see us play. We were playing a gig in late 1985, I guess in the fall of '85, and he fell in love with the band and really loved what we were doing, and was very interested in what was happening with us. And he ended up following our adventures, I guess, for about a year roughly. And Virgin Records, with Doug as the president, ended up offering us a record deal in the fall of '86, and it took a few months, I guess, to negotiate that. And we ended up signing the deal in December of 1986, and that took us to another level. We were signed to a major record label, which was more than we had ever thought would happen. We were realistically hoping that our independent records could get picked up for distribution with a major record label, and we could go from there. But we got more than I guess we had planned or bargained for with directly signing to a major record label. And with that came a massive publicity and promotion and much bigger budgets than we could have ever come up with for doing our independent recordings. And it just brought the band up to a whole other level. In early, January of '87, we went in and recorded through January, February into March our very first album for Virgin Records, Big Blue Sky. And then away we went. So really, I guess that's in a long-winded description how I ended up having a career in music, because that's really where we really, what I would classify as really having a career, is when we signed a major record label deal. We were doing music full time for a number of years before that, but really hadn't gotten to the point where we could really see the potential of actually making a half decent living doing music until we signed with Virgin. So there's the long answer for how did you get your start in the music business.
That is completely okay. Like, you answered a couple more of my questions in along that, but that is all right, because I have a few extra to ask you. So along with the whole Northern Pikes section of your career, this past summer you and Northern Pikes came to Brockville and did the Thousand Islands Regatta Festival. What was that experience like?
It was a good experience, but I do recall that the day that we played, there was an accident, because the regatta, the speedboat racing, and somebody was killed in an accident, and there was a possibility that we weren't going to actually play. They had thought of possibly canceling the music for the evening, and then they decided to go ahead with it. But the show itself was really fun, and the people were really great. There was just the stuff leading up to it. We didn't know until a couple hours before whether we were actually gonna play or not. And you're aware that something terrible has happened, that a tragedy had occurred, and that kind of thing. But I must say, the gig was really fun, and the evening was beautiful weather. And I remember there was a big tunnel there, as I recall, right behind the stage, and which is, if I'm not mistaken, it goes for like half a mile or something underneath there. We took a few pictures, but I'm a little claustrophobic, so I didn't want to go too far into the tunnel. But it was fun. Brockville was great. I mean, the nice thing that's happened, really, to sum up where we went from the Pikes from there, from signing our record deal, we did a number of records with Virgin Records. We got to tour literally every nook and cranny in North America, and then we stopped playing, I guess, in '93. We stopped for about 6 years, and we were just kind of burnt out. Really, we did what happens with many bands. You just didn't take a break. We didn't plan things as well as we probably should have, and we parted ways with our management. We didn't really replace them with anybody that could really help us, and then we kind of regrouped in the year 2000, and really haven't stopped playing since then. We've with a few I would say sabbaticals along the way, but really for the most part, since we regrouped in late 1999, we've been playing ever since. So it's been another it's been a 20-year run really since then. And we play a lot of festivals in the summer, a lot of outdoor type things, and they're really fun. And I mean, Brockville it's a neat place. I mean, but I do recall, a number of years ago, and this is probably, I'm thinking probably 12 or 15 years ago, playing in Brockville, and we played right near the water. It wasn't the same thing, the Regatta Festival. It was something else, and there were these mayflies, as I think what they were, these little kind of like miniature grasshoppers that kind of invaded and they were everywhere. And I can remember I'd never encountered that before. They were all over our guitars and flying into our mouths as we were singing and that kind of thing. And it made for an interesting evening. And I do recall finishing up the night and gathering up our stuff, and there was kind of a layer of these mayflies all over the stage. And the early next morning we flew to St. John's, Newfoundland. I can recall we flew up there, and I can remember we were playing the next day. It was Canada Day, so we would have played on June 30th in Brockville, whatever year that was, like 2006 or 7 or 8, something like that. And the next day in St. John's, I opened up my guitar case. We were playing in the afternoon for Canada Day, and all these mayflies flew out. So, I guess we introduced them to Newfoundland inadvertently. So, but Brockville's cool. There's such history there. And I remember we had a great meal there, and I remember people were so nice, and there is a lot of history. That is really a beautiful place. We were all very, very impressed with Brockville, I can tell you that.
Yeah, my husband and I were actually from Brockville, and yeah, those, like, we've called them shadflies. And
Shadflies, okay.
oh yeah, like during the summers when you go down to Blockhouse, by where the tunnel where you said you performed, it's the worst place to be when they're that time of year, because you have to make sure your windows are up. You can't really get any fresh air, otherwise, like you said, you're going to be eating those flies.
Yeah, they were everywhere. And so, what time of year is that? Midsummer? Is that more like July or August that they show up?
I believe so, yeah. It's
Yeah.
like for
Well,
like maybe a month or a little bit less, but it's like
wow.
a long period of time when you've got to be careful. It's just going down around that area.
Wow. Interesting. Oh well, the cool thing about having played a lot, and with the Northern Pikes have played every province and territory in Canada, and a lot of cities. I wouldn't say all the cities, but an awful lot of places, and the United States too. The continental United States. I think we played in. I think the only state in the continental United States we didn't play in was the one that was closest to Saskatchewan, which was North Dakota. Now, how strange is that? I don't know. But anyway, we played a lot of places in the United States. We did a lot of touring down there, and we made some good inroads. We never really completely cracked the USA, but we did have a couple of songs that did very well. One was Things I Do for Money, and the other was She Ain't Pretty, and both those songs got a lot of airplay down there, and we did a lot of touring, both as a headliner in clubs and smaller venues, as well as doing a lot of opening act slots along the way as well. So, but the neat thing is you do get to see a lot of different places.
Oh yeah. So my next question is, so you are a multi award winner. You've won. You've been awarded 4 gold records and a platinum record, which is amazing accomplishments. How does it feel to know that you've won those awards?
Well, it feels good. I've got them hanging up in my little office here. The one I like the most is the Big Blue Sky gold record, because it's actually a gold vinyl record. The other ones were actually, they're cool, but they're like CDs. So they're like CD awards. They're with the cover of the album in the CD in a kind of a picture case. But the Big Blue Sky album, which came out in 1987, which was when vinyl was still primarily the main way of getting your music. That one's actually vinyl. But awards are cool. It's neat. We've been nominated. I've been nominated for an awful lot of awards. I haven't won that many awards. I've won a few things along the way, but it's to me. I figure if you ever get nominated for something, that's in itself such an honor to be, considered among the top in whatever category that may possibly be. And that in terms of the Northern Pikes and in terms of composing for film and TV, which is another thing that I do. I've been fortunate. I've had some good success there, and sometimes when you're in the midst of working on things, you're not even aware of the fact that you're achieving a level of success or notoriety. I can remember a couple of things. We were touring in the USA, and the song "Things I Do for Money," which was the first single released in the States, it got into like high rotation on MTV, and it was doing very, very well at American, what they call album rock radio, and I think it got up to number 30 in the national Billboard chart there and that kind of thing. But the thing is, I think I saw it like twice on MTV in a hotel room, and I can also remember when the song "Girl with a Problem" went to number one. It was number one, I think, on the Much Music countdown for a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, and I saw it once. I saw the very tail end of it on Much Music just once, but it was really cool to sort of see that thing where it says number one. It was kind of a neat thing, and good for your ego, I guess, more than anything. But like I say, we were just so busy at that time that my dog is walking around here clickety clacking. Okay, sit down. Yeah. So what? The thing that happens is you're just so busy. You don't have time to think about any of this stuff. And back then there was a lot more hands-on type things involved in regards to, doing interviews and making public appearances and in-store appearances and those kind of things. And it's so, whenever if you had to do phone interviews, like there weren't cell phones then. So, I mean, for instance, you'd have to if you're on the tour bus, you'd have to figure out a spot where you could get to a gas station and get to a pay phone and start popping in coins so that you could, phone radio stations if there was an interview lined up that you had to do, or those kinds of things, or conversely, actually physically showing up and being in one place, yourself. You couldn't. There was no internet. There was no cell phones. So those things, and even in the early days, basic meat and potato stuff like getting for instance, if you received a check for a show that you did or something, where there was no ATMs, you'd have to go to a local bank if you were, if you received a check or something like that, and sometimes you needed the money. You had to get the money because you needed to pay for stuff to continue your touring, etc. And it would be quite a challenge to cash a check in a city where people don't know you and that kind of thing. And so, the technology has made a lot of touring elements a lot more convenient and a lot more accessible, and I guess in relation to what we were talking about, how does it feel to have the awards? They're cool. They're a neat thing. And I'm very proud of the work that the Northern Pikes have done and the work that I've done. And it's cool. And I feel good about it. At the same time, it's a fleeting thing. And the music industry is a very fluid thing that continues and evolves and changes constantly. And if you're going to be in this world, you kind of have to adapt accordingly. And I've tried my best, even though I don't feel like I'm ever catching up to technology, but I've realized that I probably won't. And it's like that with songwriting. I can remember coming to the realization, and I guess in the early days of the Northern Pikes, because previous to that, in some of the groups I've been in, I really tried to write songs for what I perceived as the current environment or atmosphere for like the radio or that kind of thing. And then I think there was a point where I realized, you know what, I can keep trying to chase trends or chase things, and I'm never going to catch up. You're never. By the time you finally get it written and recorded and released, time goes by and something else has shown up. So the thing that I came to realize is be yourself within the music that you do. And once I kind of accepted that, and once I kind of realized that that was the thing that was going to be unique and hopefully interesting, and hopefully interesting for some other people as well. Once I came to that realization, it was like there was a sense of, I guess, serenity and a sense of thinking, okay, you know what? I'm just going to do what I do. I'm going to write the songs I do. And if somebody says they sound like country rock, or they sound like this, or they sound like that, who cares? They're the songs that came out of me. And with the Northern Pikes, we really developed kind of our own sound from square one, because we started ignoring whatever the trends were. We didn't try and keep up with anything. We just did. We wrote songs that we thought were good and tried to perform them and record them as well as we could. And that's what it came down to, you know.
I think that's probably the best way to be, is just develop your own sound.
Well, it's easy to get caught up in things. It really is, and it's the kind of thing, especially when you're young and you're really trying to, I guess, make a name for yourself with your music, and trying to find a way for your band to get more popular and that kind of thing. And you look at other bands, and you look at other artists, and you go, well, they're doing this, maybe we should do that, etc. And once I stopped doing that, once the band, the Northern Pikes, which we never really did, we didn't chase any trends, and I think that's why we developed into a really good band, because we weren't trying to follow trends. We just, from square one with the Northern Pikes, just said, this is what we do, this is what we're going to do. And it was challenging in the early days of the Pikes, because the music that was popular, commercially at least at that time, was a lot of keyboard-oriented music and dance-oriented music, and we were really a guitar rock pop band, really from square one. And when we did our cover songs, it was always we were never a really good cover band, because we couldn't really emulate a lot of the sounds that were current in 1984 or 1985. We didn't have keyboards. We didn't use sequencing and a lot of electronics. We were the same format, essentially, that the Beatles were: 2 guitars, bass, and drums. And that was our sound. Now, interestingly enough, around the time that the Northern Pikes signed a record deal, there were a bunch of groups within kind of a year of us that in Canada that were doing stuff that was kind of in the ballpark of what we were doing, guitar pop music with harmonies, and that was bands like the Grapes of Wrath and 5440. Those bands immediately come to mind. There was another band called Chalk Circle, and then there were, the Tragically Hip was shortly after that, and Blue Rodeo was around the same time as us doing that, and and it's like every major label kind of signed a group that was doing something that lived within the same world musically at that time. So it's funny how things go, and I guess we were kind of part of that, and that's cool. I mean, that was a phase that happened in Canadian music that I think was pretty neat. There was a lot of good music that came out really at that time as a result of the record labels being interested in that kind of music.
Nice. Well, yeah, and to go along, like, with what you have been talking about, like, sometimes what you think might not work actually ends up being what works well in the end.
Oh, for sure. And I can think of that specifically with a couple of songs of ours that became really popular. One of them was the song Things I Do for Money, which I never thought would ever be a single or anything. And in fact, when I first presented it to the guys in the band, I just thought, I was a bit hesitant. I thought, well, this is kind of a strange song the way that I was envisioning it. I thought this is more like a Pink Floyd stream of consciousness type song, and I thought maybe this isn't doesn't work within the context of the Northern Pikes. Maybe this is a song that's, doesn't lend itself to this band very well, but ultimately it did, and it became a really popular song. We made a really cool version of that song. Another song that did very well for us as a single on commercial radio that we, the writer of the song originally was Brian from the band, and that was She Ain't Pretty. And what we would do, and that was about the time, when we were preparing to go in to record Snow and June record, which was their third album on Virgin Records. And by that time, Brian and Merle were both writing as much as me, which was cool because it sort of took some of the pressure off me being a primary songwriter. So I was really happy that the guys were doing that. And they were coming up with lots of really good songs. And we would exchange cassette tapes. We would just do rough little recordings on an acoustic guitar into a little cassette player, and then we would exchange them and listen to each other's songs and give our comments or suggestions, or go, gee, I like that one, or I think this one's better than this one, or whatever it might possibly be. And I remember Brian gave me the tape. He said, oh, there's one song in there, it's kind of a silly song, I just I don't know about that one, kind of thing. And that was the song She Ain't Pretty that was on that tape. And I remember saying, geez, it's kind of a catchy song. I know you think it's kind of a silly song, but I said it's kind of fun. I think it's kind of a cool song. And it really is a smart song, and it was written from true experiences that happened with Brian when he was working at the Army and Navy department store as a sign painter, and he was washing dishes at the Keg as part-time. And then we were playing, the Northern Pikes were playing in the early days, and that's where that song kind of came from. And I remember saying, well, maybe what we should do then, and why don't we learn this song, and we'll play it live to see how the reaction is. And we did. And I remember first time we ever played it, and I think it was maybe Calgary at a summer venue. I think it was maybe at the Axe or something like that. And we were supposed to be playing outside, and they moved it inside into kind of a hockey rink. And what we did, I think we played it either at the end of our set or in our encore, just to sort of see what would happen. We'd never played it live before, and really by the second chorus, the whole audience was singing, she ain't pretty, she just looks that way. And, I remember coming off stage with the guys, we all kind of looked at each other and said, yeah, I think we should record that. I think that one's going to possibly be a really popular song. And it did. It became a huge song for us. So you never know. You never know. Sometimes things that you least plan for can happen. I mean, being a composer for film and TV was not something I ever in a million years dreamed I would do. And just through a number of circumstances, I ended up doing that and working on the Due South TV show, which led to lots of other opportunities to be a music composer for film and television. And I'm really grateful for the opportunities that I've had along the way. And sometimes it's the same old thing. I mean, when I started doing that was really when the Northern Pikes broke up for the first time in 1993. And I got a call from an agent in Vancouver and said that there's a producer who really likes my songs and is interested to know whether I might be interested in trying to compose a theme song for this potential TV series. And she described the plot of the show, and they were shooting the pilot at that time, partly in the Yukon, partly in Toronto. And that was for Due South. And she described it to me, and this idea came to me as she was describing this on the phone, and I started writing things down, and I could hardly wait to get off the call because I had this melody in my head, and I just wanted to get it down before I forgot it. And that became the Due South theme song, and then subsequently they ended up really liking that, and from there said, look, do you want to try and write some instrumental music for the score for some of the scenes? We'd like to see what you could do with that. I was somewhat hesitant because I had no knowledge of doing this and no technical knowledge. But they sent me a VHS tape with a few rough cuts of some scenes from the pilot movie, which was still in progress, still shooting at that time. And I recorded some stuff just very roughly, and told them in the note when I sent the music out to them, physically sent the cassette. I said, this is where it should start. This is where it should end. And a few weeks later, I heard back from them. They said, oh, we really like what you're doing. We'd like to see if you might be interested in potentially working on the pilot movie. can you come to Toronto? And anyway, they brought me up to Toronto and hooked me up with two great experienced film composers, Jack Lenz and John McCarthy. And the three of us became the composing team for the Due South pilot movie, and then subsequently the following year, I guess, when the series started, I ended up working on the series for 5 years, and from there, ended up doing a lot of work for film and television, and composing a lot for a lot of TV series and various things along the way, and just opened a whole other set of doors that I never in a million years would have dreamed that I ever would have been doing. So, and from that, I ended up doing some voiceovers. I did a voiceover for a documentary, and that ended up leading to me having that as another facet, I guess, of my career. And I do a lot of voiceovers for television commercials and public service ads, and I've done them for documentaries and those kind of things. And yeah, you never know what's around the corner. Keeping an open mind is a very valuable thing sometimes, and I feel really, really blessed and really fortunate to be able to have done, I guess, the things that I'm doing, and to continue doing the things I'm doing. You never know what's around the corner. That's, if anybody had a question for me, well, if you have any suggestion for anybody trying to get a career in music or the entertainment biz, I would say, you know what, keep an open mind, work hard, work on your skills, and you never know what's around the corner. You really don't. Lots of good things can show up when you least expect them.
That's some really good advice, really great advice for anyone looking to get into the career.
I hope so. Like I say, I've been fortunate. I feel very blessed to have been able to do the things that I've been able to do, and to continue to do the things, that I'm doing. I love music so much. It's just one of those things. Sometimes it can drive me crazy. At the same time, I absolutely love it, and it'll never be any less than my best friend. So that's what it is.
Nice. So sticking with the Due South area, because Due South was always my favorite Canadian television show growing up, and as you said, like, you did the theme song for Due South. How does it feel knowing that your music, your composed music, is going to be, I guess, connected with one of the greatest television shows of Canada?
Well, it feels good. Like I say, I feel like I was a bit of a Forrest Gump thing in terms of how I got involved in it. But I am blessed with having some good instincts when it comes to music, and I feel like that's a strength in both my songwriting and I guess in my composing for film and TV, and I really try and feel things. In terms of when I'm looking at picture and when I'm composing things for film and TV, when I'm given the leeway to actually be fully creative, which I and the composers, Jack and John on Due South, were given the leeway to create some interesting music, by the producers, and especially with Paul Haggis at the beginning, who created and produced and wrote a lot of the show. Paul was pretty cool that way. He gave us lots of creative license. At the same time, he did have some very specific ideas about what he wanted, and he knew what was good and what would work, and what wasn't good to him, and what he didn't feel would work. And I feel very blessed to have worked with him. It was really a great experience to work with Paul Haggis and with Jeff King and all of the other people actually on the TV series, because it was such a high level of work in terms of the series itself, and Paul was such an amazingly creative and intelligent guy, and what a great person to how blessed I feel to have been able to have had him as a mentor and as a boss. When I was starting to learn how to compose music for TV and film, and he was very encouraging and liked the fact that I and the other guys, and Jack and John, that we went on instinct. And those guys, I learned a lot from them too. I mean, Jack and John were they're both brilliant film composers, and I mean, they both achieved huge levels of success in their individual careers. And so to be able to work as a team with these guys, man, what a great way to learn and to improve at a really fast rate. I mean, you had to. The pressure was on. It was once, especially when it became a series. It was sort of like the time frame between shows got kind of tighter and tighter, especially the first season, and you had to come up with the goods pretty quickly. So that was a whole thing that was a different learning curve for me. When you're making albums, like with the Northern Pikes, sometimes you would do things at a slower pace, and because you didn't really have necessarily the big deadlines that were presented to you with a TV series. And with the TV series, it was sometimes, and as the show went on, by the midway point of the first season of Due South, man, we had some really tight timelines where you had to come up with a complete music score in, I remember one particular episode, I think we had 24 hours to do the music. Another one, we had like 3 days, and there's a lot of music in Due South, and the standards were very high, that we set for ourselves, and that Paul and everybody working on the show set for that show. And the nice thing is, the show stands up really well. The quality of that show and the writing and every facet of it, from the audio mixing to the editing to to the music and the acting and the writing, everything was a level up from things that had been done previously, in my opinion, in Canada, in that world. And man, you have to come up with the goods, and we were able to do that. We were able to come up with the things that we needed to under pressure when we needed to do it. And having said that, there's some fairly stressful situations when you're really against the clock and against time and that kind of thing, when you're trying to come up with the things you need to. But we did it. I feel very proud of the work that we did on Due South, and I feel very blessed that was a great way for me to learn, and a great way for me to become, I think, quite good at that over the course of a relatively short span of time.
I know when I've watched the show, I know every time the theme song comes on, I find myself like singing along with it, just because it's such a catchy theme song. Like, you can just sit there and just get lost in it.
It's a good song, I think, and I think I mean, that song is a co-write with myself and Brian from the Pikes, because what ended up happening was when I was first presented with the idea of doing the song, I remember Doug Chappelle, who was at Virgin Records, also, he was kind of aware of what was going on in regards to me being contacted by Janet York, who was the agent and Sam Feldman, who were the agents in Vancouver at that time, who were the music supervisors for the pilot and subsequently for their series. And Doug was aware. Doug from Virgin was aware that we were going to be doing this, and so he had suggested that Brian work with me on this. And so I kind of hooked up with him. It was a bit of a strange time because the band was going through a breakup. At the same time, we never, we were always retained our friendship, in terms of the guys in the band. But we ended up kind of writing two separate kind of themes. There was one that I came up with, and one that Brian came up with. And we recorded both of them and put them both out there and submitted them. And the one that came back was the one that ended up being chosen for the series. And that descending delayed guitar line was a key part of that. And it's really it was neat to be able to have a version with lyrics in it, and a version that was instrumental. And essentially, the opening credits were instrumental, and the closing credits had the vocal in them. And the song sounds pretty good. It was a high compliment. I can remember Paul Haggis a few times saying when that song would go by, he would go, "That's the best theme song on TV." And I just took that as the highest compliment you could possibly ever get, because Paul he's as good as you can ever possibly get in terms of that world. And really I would have to classify him as the smartest person I've ever worked with, and probably one of the most creative and interesting and knowledgeable people I ever worked with. So I feel really, really lucky and very blessed to have been able to work with so many really good people over the years, man. It's just sort of, if you're working with people at a really high level, you have to bring your game up to that level. And I think that's the same. It's the same in sports. It's the same in the arts as well. It's just whoever you work with, if you bring yourself up to whatever their level may possibly be, and it's cool. I just feel really, really blessed to have been able to work with a lot of the folks that I've been able to work with.
I have one more due south in a way question. So you've done some work with some co-writing songs with Paul Gross, who was one of the stars of Due South. What was it like working with Paul?
It was cool. I mean, Paul was, he's a singer-songwriter himself, and he and David Keeley did a number of albums together as the Gross Keeley Band, and both really good writers and really cool guys. And it was fun. It was really fun to work on this stuff. And I can remember going out to Paul. He had a place out in the country, outside of Toronto. I remember going away for a couple of days and whacking away at songs with Paul and David. And I can remember also writing with Paul kind of in between takes when he was on set. During the last 26 shows, where there were Paul was a producer as well. So as well as being the lead actor, I mean, he was producing, which is a huge job unto itself. So he was doing kind of everything. And I can remember, being in the trailer with Paul, in his trailer, sort of on a break, and we're working on songs and trying to come up with some of these things. And it was pretty fun. I mean, very creative guy, Paul, and David as well. I mean, both super creative guys and fun to work with. I mean, really fun to be able to sit there and write music with guys that are that creative and that quick thinking. And it's fun working with the guys too. Is they didn't mess around. It's just, let's do it. Let's get it going. So it was fun.
Nice. Sounds like it was a really great experience working on that show.
It sure was. It opened a lot of doors for me and creatively really expanded me as a writer and a musician. And I made a lot of good friends along the way too, really, and including like the mixer, the guy who mixed all the shows, and just a brilliant audio mixer, Al Ormrod. And in fact, we became really good friends. And this summer, I'm going to be playing music at his wedding in Ontario. And so he and Mary are getting married in July, and I'm very much looking forward to hanging out with him for a couple of days out in Goderich, Ontario. It's going to be fun. So, the friendships you make with the work that you do along the way is really one of the best parts of it all. It really is.
That's awesome. I also read that you offer songwriting instruction and mentoring. Why did you decide to help teach aspiring songwriters, and how can someone looking for a mentor get in touch with you for some mentorship and some instructions?
I guess it was just I started doing some of that, and back here in Saskatchewan, and I was just kind of, I guess, getting involved in songwriting groups and those kind of things, and people were approaching me and saying, "Hey, have you got, can you give me some ideas about this or about that?" And so I do that. I now do, and I can't say I do a ton of it at the moment, although there have been periods when I've done a fair amount of that in the past. But if somebody's interested in expanding their world and expanding their songwriting skills, then I can give them my opinions on things, and I can maybe hopefully impart some of the experience and knowledge that I've had in that regard. And they can just send me an email if they're interested. It's just, they can go to my website, which is just www.jaysemko.com, www.jaysemko.com. There's all the information you would need on there. and my email address is just jsemko@gmail.com. And I've done that. It's interesting because I've done co-writing and mentoring with people literally all over the place. I mean, if people as far away as New York City and Austin, Texas, and Los Angeles, and Vancouver, and Toronto, and Newfoundland, and England for that matter. So it's been kind of a fun thing to do, and I've been I feel like if I can help somebody, good, and if they're serious about wanting to do it, then we can discuss it and go from there, kind of thing.
Nice. It sounds like a really good way to get to be able to help, like, I guess, the next generation that is coming after you.
Well, one thing, when I was first writing songs and first, getting things going and starting to get a bit of a music career going, I was very, I was pretty self-oriented, and I was not really open to instruction or mentorship. Although I think through mentorship, I think a lot of that was just through the records that I was hearing and the music that I was trying to learn from. But I was not a good student that way, and I think part of it was ego, and part of it was having being stubborn and having an idea of kind of what I wanted to do with my music and how I wanted it to go. But I did start to learn after a while how valuable that can be, to actually start listening to people that have had some experience doing this. And really the nice thing is nowadays there are so many opportunities for people to just go online or go on YouTube, and you can find all sorts of interesting information. It can be pretty mind-boggling too. It can be somewhat overwhelming, and sometimes it's nice to have somebody that kind of is there to kind of be a bit of a tour guide through your journey in learning how to become a better songwriter and a better music writer in general. So from that point of view, I was not open to that, and when I did become open to that, all of a sudden I found my world really expanded, and really that started more than anything really when I started working on Due South, because I was forced to learn a whole new creative skill set that I didn't know previously. And because of that, I was able to really expand my knowledge in music. And so, yeah, if people are interested in expanding themselves that way, please just get in touch and we'll go from there.
Nice. If you're okay, Jay, would it be okay if we put your email and that in the description of the video for the YouTube channel for the interview?
Yeah, maybe it's better to just put the website, and that, because the communication, everything is on the website in terms of how to get in touch with me and all that stuff. So that's maybe the best way to do it, because all roads, the way I've kind of done it is all roads kind of lead to my website, which is just jsemko.com. So okay. That's probably the best way, and then people can they get sort of an overview of everything right there.
Perfect. All right, sounds good. So in 2018, you released your album Never Sent. What was the inspiration behind that album?
Interesting. Never Sent. Really, well, the song Never Sent was co-written with a friend of mine from Prince Edward Island. I was out there for Prince Edward Island PEI Music Week, and that was, I think, in 2016. And what they did a thing called Canadian Songwriting Challenge, and the people from PEI Music Week basically brought songwriters, a different songwriter from every province, to come out to PEI Music Week for the Canadian Songwriting Challenge and spend a few days co-writing with various songwriters and artists from Prince Edward Island. And Tim Chasen was the person that I was hooked up with, and he's a great songwriter and a super talented guy. He puts out stuff on his own as Tim Chasen, and also as a member of the East Pointers, which is a really, really cool group, which has really taken off and is kind of literally touring around the globe. And so we ended up working on that song. We did a demo for it with Tim singing it, actually. And when I was out in PEI, we did a very quick demo of that. And that was, I guess, a year before went into the studio to record the Never Sent album. And Tim, I got in touch with him because I said, you know what, I think I'd like to do this song, but I'd like to sing it. And he was totally cool with that. So that we took that, and really the inspiration for that particular song was about how sometimes there's things that we really feel that we want to do or really want to say, and we don't. And sometimes that's best. Sometimes it's best to not say something about something, and other times it is good to say it. And that's really what that song is. It's asking the question: is this a situation where I should be really expressing myself with somebody, or should I not? And it's like writing things down in a letter, sending it or never sending it. And I've been a couple times, a few times in my life when I've written down things and sent them either physically or via the internet that maybe I shouldn't have. And then other times things that I never did send that I really wish I would have in retrospect. And that's kind of what that song is about. But the album itself was, a sort of a compendium of a number of different songs. Some were written totally on my own, and some were co-writes with other songwriting friends that I have. But that became kind of the primary focus, I guess, with that particular record was, I guess, really the title track. And I just felt like it was time to put out another solo album. My previous one had come out in 2014. That was Flora Vista. And so I put out Never Sent in 2018. And they're very much, my solo albums that I release are very, very much for me as much as anything else. It's me expressing myself. I don't have expectations of, that I'm going to be a gazillion selling solo artist or anything. More than anything, I feel like I have to express myself through my music, and I record it as well as I can within the budget and time constraints that I have to do it, and I put them out. And so I think I've done 10 solo albums now, actually, and it's just really something that I love to do. I will do another one. I'm looking at, I'm not sure if it'll happen this year or next year. It sort of depends on a few things. I mean, the Northern Pikes right now, we put out actually in the summer of 2019, we put out the first album of all original music that we had put out in a number of years. There have been compilation albums released along the way and best of albums and that kind of thing. But the album Forest of Love, which came out in June of 2019, is, that was the first album of all brand new Northern Pikes music in like 15 years. So that was an exciting thing. And so we kind of did a lot of kind of summer touring and promotion around that. And that'll continue through 2020. I expect that we'll be playing a number of summer festivals and that kind of thing. And that's what we're kind of gearing up for. That's really a large part of what we do is playing a lot of, especially outdoor shows during the summer. I love playing outdoors. If the weather's nice, there's nothing that beats that. It's fantastic. I love doing it. But we've been in the studio. We went to the studio actually in the fall in Nova Scotia, which is where Brian from the Pikes, where he lives. And even though it's funny, we were all originally from Saskatchewan, but we're very much spread out. I mean, I live in Saskatchewan. I've lived in Toronto before, and was in Vancouver for a while, but came back to Saskatchewan. This is home. And Don, our drummer, he lives out in BC. Kevin Kane, our newest member of the group. Kevin Kane, who's also a member of the Grapes of Wrath. Kevin lives in Toronto. And Brian is in Nova Scotia. So we're very much a national group. But we did some recording with a great engineer-producer in Nova Scotia by the name of John Adams. And we're recording kind of an acoustic type album, which features kind of some remakes of a number of our songs from the Snow in June album, which came out originally in 1990. So this year, 2020, is the 30th anniversary of the release of Snow in June. So we're putting out an album at some point this year of kind of a more rootsy acoustic versions of some of the Snow in June songs and some other things as well, which I think might kind of surprise some people along the way. And so I'll be going back out there, I think, in March to complete that recording. And we're looking at possibly recording a new album in 2020 as well. And we're looking at maybe going in the late spring, early summer to begin work on another Northern Pikes record. So between those two things, it may not, the timing might not be right for a new Jay Semko record, but we'll see. If it works out, it works out. I'm always writing. I never really stop writing, and I co-write with lots of different people, and it's really fun for me to do that. And I feel like there's always something that I've got that I'm chipping away at. So it's just a case of finding time a lot of the time. That's really what it is.
Oh, true enough. So my next question was, what's next for you? And also, do you know if you and the Northern Pikes will be coming back to the Brockville area?
Oh, I sure hope so. I love Brockville. That's really a cool place. We really enjoyed our time out there last summer. So I'm hoping maybe this summer we'll be out there. As I say, our agent in Toronto, Ralph James, he's sort of assembling our summer schedule as we speak, and we're very much looking forward to touring right across Canada in the summer and in as many places as possible. We love playing live, and I think I feel like the Northern Pikes right now are in a bit of a real rejuvenation period. I feel like musically, I think we're as good as or better than we've ever been. And I really think that creatively, I think Forest of Love is an album that's really one of our best records, really. I really do feel like it's a really interesting record. And, I know that we're older than we were when many of our previous original albums came out, but you know what? There's no time limit. There's no expiration date on music, and I think most of us are, touch wood on this, healthier than we were, back at the end of our first phase of our career in the mid '90s. So I think there's sort of a whole world of possibilities there for the Pikes along the way. So, but I will be doing another solo record at some point. I've got a number of other projects on the go, and I'm just kind of chipping away at a lot of different things right now. And the winter in Saskatchewan it's cold and somewhat bleak, but at the same time, it's a great time to cocoon and to get some creative projects happening. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm doing a lot of writing, and I'm sort of assembling a number of things, and then I'm doing really mundane stuff like trying to get my taxes done, and that kind of thing. So, and this is a good time to do that because the one thing I've learned is that in the music business per se, when it rains, it pours. It'll seem like nothing's happening and things are really slow and nothing's going on, and all of a sudden, holy smokes, there's a hurricane of activity happening. So you just have to kind of take advantage of the quiet times when they happen. And, it's a good time for me to kind of be here and spend some time with family and friends and just sort of live somewhat of a normal life before things get really busy again.
Oh, true enough. So Jay, just before we end the interview, I was wondering, would we be able to get your social media handles? That way everyone listening could follow you and the Northern Pikes journey.
That's a good idea. I wish I knew what they were. But, if you go onto Instagram, if you just look up the Northern Pikes, there's a Northern Pikes Instagram page, and there's my page as well, which is just under my name. Just Jay Semko, Jaysemko. And in addition to that, Pikes have Facebook. We have the Northern Pikes. If you just go to Facebook and look at the Northern Pikes, you'll be able to find it there. Northern Pikes are on Twitter as well. You can go to Twitter. I don't, to be honest, I don't have them right handy in terms of the exact numbers. But really, if you just search Twitter, search Instagram for Jay Semko or the Northern Pikes. I'm not on Twitter. I've sort of there's no Jay Semko on Twitter anymore. decided I was getting a little bit overloaded with social media with my personal stuff. So I thought I would kind of reduce a couple of things along the way. And I'm on Facebook personally under Jay Semko, and I'm also the Northern Pikes are also on there as well. And there's a Northern Pikes fan page, and also a Northern Pikes page on Facebook that is run by the Northern Pikes as well.
Nice. So everyone listening, find those pages, go like them, and stay up to date with everything that's going on. And Jay,
yeah, it's social media is great, but at the same time, it can be overwhelming, and I found I was just getting a little bit overloaded, so I have reduced that a little bit for my own personal sanity.
sometimes it can get overwhelming.
Yes, indeed. But it's great that it's available now, and the tech. I'm not going to complain about technology because it's certainly made life in many ways a lot easier, especially when you're traveling. And if you're a traveling musician, man, it's nice to be able to have a lot of the technology that exists now that didn't exist 35 years ago. So that's a cool thing.
That's very true. So I just wanted to say, Jay, thank you so much for coming on OLR Exclusive. I had so much fun doing this interview and being able to talk with you.
Well, thanks, Victoria. It's been a blast hanging out, chatting, and rambling on. Thanks a lot for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. And I am definitely going to keep looking for any shows. And if you guys come back to Brockville or the area, I'm definitely going to make sure we get tickets.
Sounds good. Look forward to seeing you.
All right. And thank you so much again, Jay, for coming on the show.
Thanks, Victoria. You take care.
Thank you as well. Have a good day.
You too. All the best.
Bye-bye.